Let's cross over to speak to Thomas Gift, who is director at the Center of US Politics at UCL. Thomas, it's great to have you on the program. So this interview with ABC was really an opportunity for Biden to reassure and show voters that he's able to serve another term, but it doesn't seem to have had this effect.
Well, I don't think that anything that Biden said was disqualifying in the interview last night, but he didn't do much to calm the jittery nerves of Democrats. And I think the voices within his party on Capitol Hill, as well as kind of in the commentariat and the punditry, they're not growing any softer. Biden, I think, is in a real bind here. But as long as he says that he's going to continue to stay in the race, the Democrats really don't have any other option.
And do you see any possibility of him stepping down? And if so, what would convince him to do so?
I certainly think there's a possibility that he may do so. He may be forced to do so. I think any additional gaffes or mental lapses or senior moments, so to speak, they're going to be magnified under the microscope, and they're going to, again, louden the calls for him to step down. What may convince him, that a large number of Democratic lawmakers calling him and saying, we're just not supporting you at the moment. But I think he's getting a lot of advice from within sort of his inner circle in the White House, and they're continuing to say, at least according to reports, that you need to stay in the race, you can win it.
And there's been quite a bit of talk about who would replace him potentially. There's been some talk about Vice President Kamala Harris potentially replacing him. Who are the other potential replacements?
Well, there are a number of names that are floated. One is Maryland Governor Wes Moore. Another is California Governor Gavin Newsom. Another is Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. All of these are Democrats that have somewhat of a national profile and have been talked about in the context of this election. But I think if you're looking for a replacement, Harris is certainly going to be in the top tier of candidates, and it's going to be very difficult for the Democratic Party to not select her simply because of the position that she now holds.
And of course, even if he stays in the race, the all-important question is, can he actually beat Donald Trump? Polls are currently showing that the former president is in the lead.
Absolutely. And if you looked at the polls before the debate, Trump had a couple percentage point lead. That's widened to about 9 or 10 points nationally. Even more importantly is how he's faring in these key battleground states like Pennsylvania and Ohio and Michigan and Wisconsin. There, the numbers look even more dispiriting. And I do think that one of the concerns that Democrats raised with last night's interview was that he didn't seem to understand the urgency of the situation and the point at which he now stands. If he loses to Donald Trump and sort of goes about his business here, despite all the calls for him to step down, I think his legacy is really going to be damaged.
And I wanted to get your opinion on reports that I saw that Biden's staff have apparently been instructed to avoid scheduling events for him after 8 p.m. We're talking about a president who, if he stays in office, will have to deal with anything that can come at any time. So even if he wins, will he actually be able to govern, if he can't stay up past 8 p.m.?
Well, it's a great question. I think that the White House has offered a string of excuses that were not very convincing. One that he had jet lag, another that he has a cold, another that this doesn't happen outside the window of 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. This is not a part-time job. This is the presidency of the United States. You need to be acute and aware at all hours of the day because emergencies can happen at any time. Back in 2008, Hillary Clinton had a famous advertisement where she asked voters, who do you want to take that 3 a.m. phone call? And apparently Biden's response to that is wait 7 hours and we'll get back to you. It's not a convincing message.
No, and I also wanted to get your opinion on some reports that some have been saying that he's quite out of touch following that interview on ABC, that he's quite out of touch with voters. Give us your assessment of that.
I think Biden needs to rethink his current messaging, which seems to be that he's a less adept version of his prior self, but that he's serviceable relative to Trump. That's just not inspiring. The day after the debate, Biden said at a rally in North Carolina that he doesn't walk as easy as he used to, speak as smoothly as he used to, debate as well as he used to. But then apparently voters aren't supposed to ask the obvious, whether Biden can negotiate with foreign leaders as easy as he used to, work with an opposition Congress as smoothly as he used to, make decisions about war and peace as well as he used to. I do think there's a sense that Biden's inner circle is protecting him, shielding him from public view, and he does seem somewhat out of touch about sort of the concerns that are being raised, the legitimate concerns.
And Thomas, tell us, what do you think? Do you think Biden can actually continue and serve another term in office?
Well, that's a really good question. I do think that it's time for him to step down. There are just too many concerns being raised that I'm not sure that he can have the mandate that he wants going into the next presidency, even if he can beat Donald Trump. You know, we're not just talking about the next 4 or 5 months, which is one thing. We're talking about the next 4 or 5 years. And I do think that these concerns about Biden's mental acuity and physical vigor are valid. We're saying that now when he's 81. Can he make it through another 4 years whenever he's 85, 86? I really don't see it. Increasingly, I really don't see it, which is a shame because he's really had sort of a remarkable legacy as vice president and now president. And I do think that he risks throwing that away.
And just a final question on what he said in that interview. He repeatedly taking an independent medical evaluation. What's reaction likely to be to that he's saying no to getting tested?
Well, I don't think that that's too surprising. I mean, his campaign would say that this is sort of a gimmick and it's unnecessary. But the fact that he won't take it, I think, does say something. If he knew that he was going to pass with flying colors, I don't see any downside to it. Maybe there is concern within the administration that he wouldn't be able to pass it. So I think it's a legitimate question. But I do think more important is just what viewers are seeing, and they can't unsee what they saw at the debate last week. And I think even in last night's interview, although he was better, certainly he was better, he still comes off as relatively frail. And that's just the reality. He's 81 years old. Again, there's no shame in that. But the question is whether that makes him fit for 4 more years in office. And a lot of Americans, 72% of Americans, in fact, don't think that he has the mental acuity and physical vigor to do the job.
Thomas Gift, thank you so much for coming on the program. Thank you for your analysis. Thank you. Thomas Gift is a director at the Center of US Politics at UCL.